Hello, everyone. This is Candice Richardson Dickens, the host of Dope Black Therapist channel on YouTube channel and on LinkedIn. I want to talk about something since we're on the cusp of February, which, as you know, is Black History Month. And something happened recently that I wanted to address. And I think it's very important because the world is changing. And sometimes changes show up in big ways, and sometimes the lack of changes show up in small ways. So, for those of you who are following me, I want to talk about something that happened to me recently. Um, I was at a clinical training, an advanced training, and it doesn't matter which one it is because I don't want to identify a person, but I was at an advanced clinical training, and I was the only African American, and there were 12 other white clinicians in the room. And the supervisor, the advanced trainer who's training all of us, licensed clinician, was someone who was not African American. Person is a white clinician. And they were speaking, and we were talking a little bit about how we have these parts that are amplified, and people who are not clinicians, like we all have parts of us. Like there's a powerful part, there's a smart part, there's a child part, there's a petty part, there's a confident part. All parts of us make up who we are. And sometimes we have parts that stay in childhood, and then those parts have protective parts, right? So if you were bullied as a little kid, you might have this protective part who's also 7 years old, who knew how to protect that child wounded, vulnerable part by fighting or robberying something. But we were doing parts work, and someone had mentioned that they have this part that when they go into an organization, whether it's boxing or wrestling, this part gets activated and feels strong. And just going into a gym where there's boxing and they're putting on the boxing gloves, even though they don't hit anyone, they feel powerful. And the supervisor, upon hearing this, says, I have a part also that feels strong, that feels activated. And one day I was walking with my husband, and we saw these three Black guys coming towards us. And my husband got scared of these big Black guys. And I said, "Don't worry about it, honey. I got it because I take karate." And laughed and laughed and laughed. And at that moment, right, I had my own polyvagal activated response. And polyvagal is that nerve I talked about that looks for safety. And I scanned quickly around the whole screen to see who was laughing and who was not laughing. Because I could not believe that this person who I really held in high esteem had said something that had a racist overtone. They had said that they were afraid of Black men. Seeing three Black large men made them afraid. And I sat there and I said, "No, speak to this person after this is over." And it was a 2-hour supervision. I have so much respect for the person. I didn't feel like calling them out. I wanted the I wanted the process to be the process and my process to happen after the meeting. And I think that's something that happens in BIPOC communities. We get charged with an injury, charged with knowing something's not right. We shut down a little bit, not powerless, but having to reserve the energy because it's not safe to let the energy just flow, to speak up and say, "Let me interrupt you, that's wrong." That even I, Candice Richardson Dickens, licensed in several states, realized I'm activated. And there's a part of me that checked out. And I sat there, and I remember sitting there like this and saying to myself, "I like this person, but this is some right? I'm activated, right? Because the fantasy is, if I hear something say that's wrong, the fantasy is I'm going to check them right there. But what happens when there's a power dynamic and you have esteem for this person? And my plan was, because anyone who knows me knows, I'm going to come back, right? I may not do it publicly, I might do it privately, but I'm going to have a conversation. But in that moment, I remember thinking, this is a teaching moment, and I am a teacher. It's a teaching moment. And after the laughter, one of my colleagues was talking about a client. And I remember I can put my stuff there and interrupt this process and distract this man from talking about a client and distract him from getting the lesson he needed that he paid for. And as I was sitting there, I made the choice to speak to her about it later. And I remember thinking, this doesn't feel comfortable. How am I going to sit here for 2 hours with this sitting in my chest? And I'm having to push it down, right? Because what I said in other sessions, that polyvagal response is that shutdown response, where I really can't show how I really feel, because it's not appropriate, or it's not time, or it's not something. And I sat there, shut down. And while I'm sitting there, my eyes happened to drift to the bottom of the screen, and I saw this chat going crazy. And I never look at the chat boxes when I'm in trainings or supervision because I paid my money for supervision. I'm not wasting my money. So I clicked on it, just being curious because I've already shut down and checked out a little bit and just trying to be respectful of the process, but not really being in the process. Because when BIPOC members of the community, when something happens that's egregious and it happens in a professional setting, right? There's this thing about us not wanting to fit into stereotypes. There's this thing about us not wanting to make people uncomfortable. And there's this thing about even though you've disrespected me, I may not disrespect you in the same way. I'll do it privately. So we have this private, nice conversation. But I went into the chat. What I saw, let me lean in when I say this. What I saw, the first message said, I'm so uncomfortable, I'm checked out. I can't believe this was said. I wanna protect Candace because I feel like what was said was so racist and I'm so surprised. And the other part said, I am so activated, I'm not present either. I feel so bad. I feel like I should do something, but I don't know what to do. And that moment I realized they're stuck too. We're at that dorsal polyvagal experience where we are activated, but it's not safe. So when we're activated, we fight, flight, we do something, right? We talk about something. But when we realize that it's not good, what we do is we push it down and we go into the lower part of us, that dorsal part, that stomach part, that part that goes, I want to say, but don't do it. And we shut down, we play nice. And we act like we're not activated. We cut that part off, right? As a lot of ancestors says, we check out from the neck down. I'm checked down, I'm in the dorsal part. But when I read those notes and I read those chats, and I saw that they too were activated, and they weren't just activated for them because their belief system was about fairness and equity. And there's been enough training and enough conversations about what that looks like to respect diversity, inclusion, and equity, and recognizing when there's racist conversations happening, that or there's marginalization happening with people in the room. And I saw the next conversation was, I feel powerless. I don't know what to say because she's helping so and so, and I don't want to interrupt that, but I want to do something because I think it's wrong. And I looked at these women who have positions of power, not knowing what to do, right? So then we got a gender thing, right? Because marginalization is not just something that's for BIPOC people. It's for people who are at that intersectional part where you can be marginalized as a woman. A white woman is marginalized. She might be marginalized differently because I have two intersectionalities. I'm African American and I'm female and I'm older. Three, excuse me. Thank you. Right? So what occurred to me was that in that moment, there was power happening and people didn't know how to stop this really powerful person who we all held in high esteem. We came there as teachers. So these are clinicians who are in their 20s. These are not clinicians in their 30s. These are clinicians who've been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this for 31 years. We're seasoned clinicians, so we're older clinicians, and we're all looking at this with the same lens that something happened. So what I put in the chat was, I will speak to her about it. But I was real clear, right? That even though they have privilege, there's a part of them that doesn't feel privileged enough to interrupt her. And we're all going from the same experience as women, but my experience is different because I'm just not female. I'm African American, and I'm the only African American in the group. And there was a discussion with me prior to coming into this group a year ago that there were other people who had checked out of the group because of a racial undertone that I never felt. So I had spoken to the supervisor, and she had asked me, please let me know because I'm very open minded. And I hate racism, and I rally for people of diverse backgrounds. And I sat there for a year and never felt any marginalization or minimization of me, my color, my experience, and my skills. So when I did, so what's interesting is that I waited for her to finish with this other clinician. And she said, what's going on? I see all this chat. And then someone said, what's happening is that something's been said in the chat and that people are having a reaction to. I think you unintentionally said something that marginalized Candace. And then I said, I'm not sure if it was unintentional, but you said something that racist and racial overtones by saying that you were afraid of three black men, and historically, that there's a narrative about black men not being safe, how you have to clutch your purse, cross the street. And that narrative, right, has caused us to have mass incarcerations of Black men, and cause people to fear them and stereotype them as not being in the home, as being dangerous. And from the last videos, it's about other stereotypes that are happening with Black men as well, right? We're the drug dealers, we're the sellers, or we're the, right? That people don't see us as people, and Black men aren't seen as collective. You only see one part of us. You only see one part of our sexuality. You only see one part of our life story. You don't see that we are a multitude of experiences. There were many things, but the narrative that gets portrayed in the media is we're just one thing. Right? It's one dimensional, and that one dimensional is often seen as not safe and not and powerful, but dangerous. So when I said that, then the other clinicians chimed in and talked about how their parts were activated, and they appreciated that I spoke about how my part was activated, and I had another part that liked her and wanted to respect her, but there was this part of me that stepped out. And the other clinicians spoke about how their parts were activated, and they were very disappointed. And what the supervisor said was, it was an old story. I've always told that story. I didn't think anything in the room. And she's older. She might be in the 70s, or maybe in the 80s. And then her peer, who may have been around the same age, said, I know, but when we're older, we've got to do better. When we're older, we have to do better because the world has changed. And some old stories get carried into a new experience and creates a dynamic where there's disconnection and uneasiness, and people get hurt. And it was the best supervision I have ever had because we had a really honest conversation about wounded parts and historical parts that carry the legacy of racism. And I don't think this woman's racist. I do think that what she said revealed some racist beliefs or some stereotypes about Black men. And I think for her, she was just trying to say that she had this activated part that felt strong, and that when three people came who she thought was scared, that she didn't fear them. But I do recognize that there was a race part. And what she said was, I could have told the story without the race. And she could have, but it wouldn't have highlighted the truth. And part of us going into Black History Month is really recognizing what some truths are and really recognizing what parts of us might be carrying a legacy of racism or oppression or discrimination, or what narratives do we repeat, right? What narratives do we repeat that might repeat this system of oppression, that might marginalize people? And then for us, what old roles do we play? Do we play small? Do we shut down instead of speaking up? Because what was interesting is that 12 licensed clinicians, and everyone was not in the United States. And one person who was not from the country said, whoa, what happened? What happened? What happened? And we had to explain racism to this person who is not in this country, who had a different experience with racism because he didn't see it. So we had to explain it. And when he heard, he was like, oh, is that what I meant? Oh. Right? Because he said, my country, we don't see color that way. Race is different in America than in other places. And I wanted to share that with each of you on this social media platform, because next week is Black History Month. And sometimes we treat it as just a month, but it's not just a month. It is a month of reflection. It is a month to really look inside of yourself. And it's a month to practice culture humility, to come into someone's world and try to understand from their perspective what it's like to be them, what it's like to not have a voice, what it's like to not feel powerful, and what if it's like to sit in a shut down place where you realize that if I speak up, someone's going to see that as threatening, and then I'll become the angry Black woman, right? Like those three angry, scary Black men. And I think that is the burden that African Americans and other BIPOC communities have to carry, the burden of how we're seen and having to manage that. And then there's the burden of um, having to of white fragility, of having to manage and make sure you're not uncomfortable. And so when I said what I needed to say, I really was mindful of, I'm not going back and make the person feel comfortable, making anyone feel comfortable. I'm going to stand by what I said, and I'm going to encourage other people to have a say. And we all had a say. And then later on, the person who sent the chat message had said, oh, I'm so sorry. I sent it accidentally. I meant to send it to one person, but by mistake, I sent it to everyone. And I thanked that person. I said, it's interesting. You made a mistake, but that mistake gave me an opportunity and a window to come out and really speak on how I felt and did it publicly, because sometimes an ugly truth has to be spoken about publicly and can't wait, because the incident happened publicly, and it really cleaned the experience, and it made me feel like, wow, I'm in safe space. And safe space is when we can have a conflict, and it doesn't have to end a relationship. We can have a conflict and learn from that conflict and do better the next time. So I hope that you've gotten something out of this conversation today. If you've had those experiences as well, please feel free to share in the comment box. But I want you to go into this month, letting it be the first day of many days, of many months, where you're going to be conscious about what you say and what you do, because it matters. It's good seeing everyone. Take care. Bye bye. And if you want to see more of my videos, go to Dope Black Therapist YouTube channel, and you can see more videos similar to this and about other topics too. And if you're looking for a clinician and you're in the Maryland, the Maryland, Denver, DC area, visit me at CandiceRDickens.com, and I'm currently accepting new clients. Take care. Peace out. Hmm.